Hello class and welcome to a new analysis of Absences by Philip Larkin. This poem is a compressed and intensely visual meditation on the sea and sky, and on what it feels like to be erased from the world. Its central themes are absence, the indifference of nature, and the unsettling sensation of self-erasure. Philip Larkin was one of the most important British poets of the 20th century, associated with the movement. Absences was published in his 1955 collection, The Less Deceived. Before we move into the poem, let's consider the title, Absences. First of all, the diction absences carries the connotation of something or someone missing. Absence here not only represents emptiness in a landscape, but emotional hollowness, isolation, and the erasure of the self. The title is also immediately striking because of the plural form in absences. It isn't just one absence, one single loss, but absences, multiple and accumulated. So there is a fascinating tension here between the plural form and the word's meaning. Absences suggest incompleteness, things missing, voids, yet the plural form itself signals abundance. There is an abundance of nothingness. We will now move on into stanza 1. I'll leave you a moment to read the first stanza and form your own opinion before I begin the analysis. As you have read, in this stanza, Larkin paints a furiously energetic seascape. Rain falls, waves rise and collapse in towers and walls, scatter and keep playing. First of all, what jumps out to me in this first stanza is the onomatopoeia on patters. Here, the verb patters is onomatopoeic. It sounds like what it is describing, giving the rain an almost gentle and domestic quality that is at odds with the vast, indifferent ocean. This creates unease from the poem's very first word. The sea is then personified. It tilts and sighs. This sighing might represent a first layer of pathetic fallacy. A sigh is a human gesture of weariness, resignation, or grief, projected outward onto the ocean to mirror an inner emotional state. We then have a brilliant showcase of sibilance in sea, tilts, and sighs. Those soft hissing S sounds mimic the sound of spray and wind on water, drawing us sonically into the seascape before a single wave has been described. The second layer of pathetic fallacy comes with the very description of the rain. The pummeling deluge which is described in this first stanza might just reflect the inner tumult which the speaker feels. And this connection between weather and inner state runs through the stanza. Moving on to the second line, before the analysis, a moment of paraphrase. These fast-running floors suggest that the surface of the sea is like a floor, a ground beneath your feet that keeps on moving quickly. It gives a powerful sense of instability, as if the ground itself cannot hold you firm. Once again, this might reflect the inner state of the speaker, this instability. It is in the second line that Larkin introduces the extended metaphor that will run all throughout the poem of architecture. This sustained architectural lexical set with floors, tower, wall, galleries, attics runs through both stanzas and is one of the poem's most powerful structural choices. Nature builds and destroys its own rooms endlessly with no permanent space for the human inside them. This reinforces the theme of a self-sufficient nature which excludes human intervention. The world is vast, endlessly active, and complete in itself. It builds and collapses and builds again without ever pausing to ask whether a human being might need somewhere to stand. The rugged and violent movement of these collapsing floors is also a further strand of pathetic fallacy. The rough and relentless instability of the sea mirrors the speaker's inner turbulence. The unusual and disordered syntax shown by a noun phrase stripped of its verb once more mimics the instability and turbulence of the sea. The grammar itself collapses just like the floors it describes. And this is really hammered home through the persistent enjambments in this stanza, which mimic the wave's own restless and unstoppable motion. Let's now move on to line 3. Tower suddenly, spray-haired, contrariwise. Again, a short moment of paraphrase. Tower suddenly means the waves suddenly rise up like a tower, whilst spray-haired means the tops of these waves are covered in a white sea spray, almost like hair blowing in the wind. Well, first of all, the compound adjective spray-haired is a flash of personification. The wave is given human hair, but it is made of spray, which is momentary and insubstantial. Larkin gives nature a human trait only to withdraw it, mirroring the poem's broader argument that this world cannot hold human meaning for long. The caesura after spray-haired with the full stop mid-line fractures the rhythm sharply, which enacts the wave's sudden reversal of direction. The archaic word contrariwise is sort of mock formal and unusual diction which draws attention to the sea's unpredictability. Then we have a beautiful showcase of juxtaposition embedded in the verbs. Here, wilting suggests exhaustion and collapse, while scrambling suggests frantic and almost desperate energy. Together, they describe something simultaneously spent and, at the same time, perpetually moving. The sea is exhausted and inexhaustible at once. The diction of wilting not only introduces the theme of physical exhaustion, but also emotional and moral exhaustion of the speaker. Next, the parallelism in no ships and no shallows really hammers home the absence twice. It really insists on this idea of absence and exhaustion. And this absence of ships and shallows obviously represents an important symbolism. If there were ships in this sea, it would bring human purpose, as ships are often associated with routes, destinations, trade. On the other hand, shallows represent the near shore, the edge where a human body might stand and look out. Both here are erased. The sea, cleared of these things, symbolizes a universe stripped of all human anchors. Let's now move on to stanza number 2. I'll leave you a moment to read the second stanza and form your own opinion before I begin the analysis. In the second stanza, as you have read, the speaker lifts their gaze from the sea to the sky. If the sea was vast and empty, the sky is even more shoreless. The emptiness intensifies. Before we start, a quick clarification in terms of diction. Saying that the sky is even more shoreless means that the sky, feels even more boundless, more directionless, and without edges than the sea beneath it. It amplifies the idea of disorientation. If a sky has no shore, then it is impossible to stake it out, to point out where it is, or to locate it. We therefore have a blatant gradation. The sky escalates the emptiness already established in the first stanza. And this is achieved through the preposition yet, which really kickstarts this gradation. It is a comparative that pushes the concept of boundlessness beyond the sea. The poem is getting emptier, wider, and even more inhospitable for humans every single stanza. On line 2, we then have the striking diction of riddled. To be riddled means to be pierced all over. The wind does not gently move through the sky, it perforates it violently. And the harshness of this verb choice again signals at the beauty of what follows and signals that the sky, like the sea, is not serene. Once again, this could represent pathetic fallacy, symbolizing the speaker's inner state and inner psyche. We once more have this extended metaphor of architecture, which reaches its fullest expression here with lit up galleries and giant ribbing. The sea has floors and towers, now the sky has galleries. Nature keeps constructing rooms. However, humans cannot live in these rooms. There is then a profound and striking showcase of symbolism. Indeed, the sky's galleries are reduced to ribbing, which is what remains when the rooms have been cleared. Even though huge galleries sprung up in the sky, only the skeleton, the ribbing, remains, which really introduces the final image of erasure. Let's now move on to the third stanza. Please pause the video and read it for yourself to form your own opinion. As you have read in a single exclamatory line, the speaker erupts into the poem for the first and only time, naming himself. This line in the poem is therefore a great volta, the turn from external scene to internal revelation. For the 9 previous lines, the poem had been carefully purged of the human speaker in a mere description of an external scene. Suddenly, however, the human speaker names himself. We now understand that the entire seascape described previously is retrospectively revealed as a projection of the speaker's inner world. We then have a wonderful metaphor in attics cleared of me. Attics are usually where we store past memories, past objects. And attics are really just an accumulation of a life. To be cleared from one's own attic, is to be erased from history, erased from memory. And this is really the endpoint, the pinnacle of the architectural extended metaphor. All the rooms of sea and sky, the floors, the towers, the galleries, were the speaker's inner architecture, and they have been swept clean. The speaker is erased from his home in nature, and he therefore no longer belongs or feels like he belongs to this world. The anaphora created by the repetition of such in 2 separate sentences creates an effect of swelling rhetorical emphasis. It is again this idea of emphasizing the abundance of absences, the abundance of nothingness. It therefore returns us directly to the tension of the title. We now perhaps understand the plural in the word absences. Perhaps the speaker wants to extend this absence to every single human being. We are all living in a world which we cannot control and which we do not belong to. The diction cleared here carries fairly significant weight, as to clear something implies deliberately and thoroughly removing something. It is an active erasure, not a passive one. Finally, the poem ends cyclically. The title of the poem was Absences, and so is the final word in the poem. This indicates that the poem has always been circling back to this single concept, this single idea. The poem ends where it began, in absence, suggesting that this erasure is total and inescapable. Let's now move on to an analysis of structure, form, and rhythm. First of all, form. There are 3 stanzas of diminishing length, 6 lines, then 3 lines, and finally 1 line. It really mirrors the poem's argument. The world empties, compresses, and contracts until only a single outcry remains. The single final line stands alone, isolated, which mirrors the speaker's isolation and absence. Finally, the free verse form, with no fixed rhyme scheme or no strict meter, gives the poem a quality of instability and drift that suits its subject perfectly. In terms of structure, as we have analyzed previously, the poem is blatantly cyclical. Interestingly, as well, is the poem's gradation throughout its progression. The poem builds steadily from the small sound of rain to the vastness of a shoreless day. The poem really moves outward from the rain to the sea to the sky, before collapsing inward onto the self in the final line. Finally, in terms of the rhythm, the poem is written in iambic pentameter. Caesurae really permeate this poem and really reenact the waves crashing and the sky's sudden shifts. And to conclude, Absences is a poem about the disturbing completeness of a world without human presence. Larkin really paints the image of a world building and destroying its own rooms endlessly with no permanent space for the human. The pathetic fallacy, which really penetrates this poem endlessly, really symbolizes the speaker's internal turmoil and emptiness. The landscape described are projections of an inner state, stripped of meaning and identity. Finally, the extended metaphor of architecture builds toward the final line and the attic, which is cleared of me. Therefore, the self is not only absent from nature, but it is also erased from its own inner world, symbolized by the home, which is described. And on that note, thank you for having listened to my analysis. Please leave a like, comment, and I'll see you in the next one.